It's a hot, dry season. A few wild boars are busy searching for food, not realizing they're being closely watched. See that? It's a young tigress. She's getting ready to claim her territory, but to do that, she must become a perfect huntress. Catching a boar isn't easy, and the tigress takes a huge risk as she moves toward her prey, step by step, carefully. She even controls the twitch of her tail so not a single blade of grass rustles. Her gaze catches the slightest movement of her prey, and finally she freezes. Before the leap, a lunge forward. The boar doesn't even have time to react before massive fangs pierce its thick hide and tear into its throat. For a few seconds it wheezes, unable to break free, then slowly falls silent. The tigress releases her jaws and lies down beside her prey. Now she's the true ruler of this land. Scenes like this could actually help Canada, a country desperately searching for ways to stop the super pigs. But what if things get even worse in the future? Let's find out. This battle will be legendary. An unobtrusive reminder to do that thing under the video. So what do we have here? This is Canada, a massive and rather chilly country where about 40 years ago a few wild boars escaped from a farm. Well, they escaped. No big deal, people thought, and didn't really bother about it. They should have, because today wild boars are wreaking havoc everywhere they can reach. Not the same ones, of course, but the offspring of those runaway boars that bred with domestic ones and got some unbelievable perks from it. I'll get to those a bit later. For now, keep one thing in mind. Boars have spread across western and central Canada, from British Columbia to Manitoba and beyond. And wherever there are boars, there's destruction of nature, of agriculture, harm to all animals without exception, and a constant, unstoppable desire to devour, because these beasts eat almost everything. Most often it's farm crops like wheat, barley, and canola. There's plenty of that on farmland. But the damage doesn't end there. Boars not only devour entire crops and ruin any kind of storage, they also dig up huge sections of farmland. Unfortunately, not because they want to help the farmers, but to find invertebrates, roots, and anything else edible left in the soil. Every patch of land gets stripped of all its resources, and it ends up looking like wild boars had been racing excavators across it, digging like crazy. Then they went splashing around in nearby streams, wrecking the banks, churning up the bottom and polluting the water. Don't forget, these boars are close relatives of domestic pigs, practically their cousins, which means they can carry infections, spread them to each other, and contaminate water sources. But the biggest damage wild boars cause is as predators. That might sound odd, boars aren't supposed to be predators, but the truth is, wild boars just don't care. If something fits in their mouth, they're going to eat it. Doesn't matter if it's plants, reptiles, ground-nesting birds, their eggs, or small mammals like gophers or squirrels. What's more, scientists have actually seen boars hunting deer. Not the big bucks, of course, but still, a fact's a fact. If you don't run fast enough, you're lunch. That pretty much explains why forest areas with wild boars have 26% fewer species of mammals and birds than those without them. Looks like that 26% just got eaten. And there are many boars, I mean a lot, and their numbers keep growing. I get why experts call them an ecological disaster, but there's one important detail. Canadian boars are a whole different story. The species was originally bred with certain traits. Remember those boars that escaped 40 years ago? They were specially designed to be bigger and to have cold resistance so they could survive the harsh Canadian winters. And then they started breeding with domestic pigs, cranking their fertility up to the max, meaning each female can produce up to 6 piglets twice a year. And wild pigs grow up fast. So we're talking about animals that weigh up to 660 pounds, armed with wickedly sharp tusks, and protected by bristly hair over thick, warm fur. And these guys reproduce at a terrifying rate, taking over more and more territory. They're not just wild pigs, they're super pigs. And they're really smart, too. Ever heard of pigs that build above-ground shelters? Well, these ones do. Researchers call their structures pigloos, piles of cattails and grass often mistaken for reeds where pigs burrow in to stay warm when it gets freezing cold. And now these monsters, constantly growing in number, are roaming across Canada, devouring everything in their path. And no one can stop them. It all began, like it often does, with a good idea. In the late 80s and early 90s, a few Canadian farmers brought wild boars from Europe. The plan was to raise them for meat. But as wild boars tend to do, some simply escaped, either by digging under fences or smashing their way through. Then the market crashed, and the farmers decided to release the rest because keeping them cost too much. People hoped none of the animals would make it through the brutal Canadian winter, but the boars proved them wrong. If boars had middle fingers, they'd be flipping them at the scientists who said it couldn't be done. And so the wild boar invasion has officially been recognized as a real problem. This happened only recently because before that, people didn't even know exactly where all these boars were. Just a reminder, Canada is an Excel-sized map where it's easy to get lost. Anyway, it's still hard to tell what the consequences of this swine-pocalypse will be, since the animals haven't gone all out yet. Scientists say the economy and the environment will suffer, the number of accidents will rise, all along with the growing boar population. There's also a risk the wild boars won't stop there and will head south. After all, they're constantly exploring new territories and trying out whatever they can find to eat. Wild boars have already gone far beyond their old habitats and are now loitering suspiciously close to the U.S. border. The U.S. is getting worried. Local experts are all shouting over each other that Canadian boars pose a multi-billion-dollar threat to the country's economy. And they're not wrong. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, wild boars already cause about $2.5 billion in damage every year. But American boars are mostly taking over the southern states. It's too cold for them up north. Super pigs don't have that problem. So before these frost-proof monsters spread everywhere and cross into the U.S., something has to be done. And it has to be done soon, while they're not a full-blown horde yet, because once they are, like any invasive species, you'll never be able to stop them. People who've been watching our channel for a long time already know how this works. For those who tuned in recently, I'll explain briefly. The faster a non-native species is detected and the quicker people react to it, the better the chances that everything will end well. While there are few individuals and they live in a limited area, they're easier to control. And the more actively the species reproduces, the sooner it needs to be caught and driven off somewhere further away. Well, or destroyed. Bottom line, wild boars are exactly that kind of invader. And guess what they're lacking? A genuinely cool predator. And no, humans aren't the answer here, because the boars are elusive. Even if they're caught on CCTV, the locals might not know the boars are nearby. But even if you spot the boars, doing anything about them is very hard. Even if you declare a hunting season for boars, even if the whole village takes up arms and goes to war against them. What's more, in places where wild boars are hunted, they're even harder to get rid of because the boars get the message. Aha! We're being wiped out! We need to breed even more actively! And breed they do. That's why people say that hunting boars only makes the situation worse. The animals break up into smaller, more inconspicuous groups that are much harder to wipe out than the big ones. Besides, hunting switches the boars into stealth mode, trains them to fear people, to retreat further into the countryside, and to be active at night. As a result, people stop seeing them and feel happy, thinking they've killed or scared them all away. In short, human hunting is so harmful in the fight against wild boars that in some places it's banned altogether. For example, the state of Kentucky enacted a ban on the sport hunting of pigs because a trained boar is harder to track or catch. And boars learn very fast, sometimes not even from their own experience. So in that situation, people's hands are tied, which means you need the help of a real predator, and preferably a big one. Allow me to introduce a new player on the field of non-native species, the Siberian tiger. It might just be the biggest cat in the world. Siberian tigers mostly live in birch forests in eastern Russia, though a few can still be found in China and North Korea. Once upon a time, these gorgeous striped animals roamed all across Asia, but they lost 93% of their historic homeland and had to move farther away from people. To avoid encounters with humans, Siberian tigers even switched to a night schedule. Yeah, just like wild boars. Actually, wild boars are kind of their specialty or main dish. In any case, boars make up 36.6% of a tiger's yearly menu. which means roughly every third meal a Siberian tiger has is a boar. Hunting isn't hard for tigers because they're strong, stealthy, and resilient. Could you, for example, walk 12 miles just for a steak? Tigers can do even more than that, and their steaks are bigger too. Boars or even moose. Tigers mostly hunt at night, relying on their camo-like fur and upgrading stealth to the max. They stalk their prey, then wait and creep close enough to strike in one fast pounce. A tiger grabs its prey, holds it with its claws, and what happens next depends on the size. If the prey is small, the tiger kills it by breaking its neck with a bite. If it's bigger, it goes for a suffocating bite on the face or throat. A hungry tiger can eat up to 59 pounds of meat in one night, though usually it eats less. Maybe it's watching its figure. At the same time, the weather conditions that Siberian tigers are used to are hardly what you'd call comfortable, especially compared to the climates where other tiger species live. In the Siberian tiger's territory, temperatures often drop below -4 degrees Fahrenheit, but they've got a bunch of clever adaptations to deal with the cold. That includes thick fur, lighter colored coats, and big paws to make walking on snow easier. It's also worth mentioning that Siberian tigers intentionally build up a decent layer of fat on their sides and belly, which keeps them warm, and that magnificently fluffy ruff around their neck, perfect for extreme cold. Even their paws are covered in thick fur, keeping them warm and making them silent hunters. And walking on snow is easier too, kind of like wearing fluffy snowshoes. Overall, even though nobody's tested this in practice yet, it looks like Siberian tigers would be pretty comfortable in Canada, but there are still some obstacles. Who's around there? Grizzlies, for example. How do Siberian tigers deal with bears? Snow-covered regions of Northeast Asia are home to several apex predators. Besides the tigers I mentioned, there are also wolves, bears, and leopards. As for the relationship between tigers and bears, I describe it as complicated. To illustrate, let me tell you a story from a witness. A few decades ago, this witness was tracking a male tiger named Dima. Before all this, scientists had already caught Dima and put a radio collar on him because he was just enormous, the biggest they'd caught in 20 years of research in that area. The tiger weighed 440 pounds. His head was bigger than an adult man's waist, and the base of his tail was as thick as a human thigh. So our witness, the researcher, was following Dima's movements through the forest until he reached a cliff, and was shocked because below lay a large, half-eaten female brown bear. The researcher immediately went down to check the body and saw a single entry wound on its neck. Then he studied the tracks. They showed that the bear had been walking on a ridge and suddenly dropped dead with no sign of a fight. The conclusion was obvious. Someone had shot the bear and Dima just took advantage of free food. But why didn't the hunter take such a valuable catch? I mean, it's not every day you get to shoot a bear, especially one this big. Then the researcher flipped the bear over and found 2 more entry wounds, and that's when everything fell into place. Dima hadn't fed on someone else's kill. He had leapt from the hill onto the bear and with a single bite pierced its skull before the bear could even realize what was happening. This attack required incredible strength and skill, but the tiger pulled it off. And then the tiger spent several days eating his prey. There are actually tons of reports about tigers hunting both brown bears and Asiatic black bears, but the relationship between these animals doesn't seem that simple, because it goes both ways. Sometimes bears kill tigers. Like I said, it's complicated. For example, the largest brown bears, weighing over 660 pounds, steal prey from tigers and even follow them from kill to kill. Tiger kills, bear eats, and there are tigers that deliberately try to pull bears with cubs out of their dens. Usually they don't succeed, but that doesn't stop them from trying. Overall, Dima was still taking a risk. Bears are some of the strongest animals with sharp teeth and fearsome claws, so it seems a bit strange to attack such stubborn prey. Why not just eat a deer? But maybe Dima went after the female bear not just to eat, but to eliminate a competitor. Plus, the female bear might have killed his cubs one day, and then the tiger did a preventative strike. Still, Dima was lucky to be a Siberian tiger, which means a really big predator. When the balance of power shifts, the bullying goes the other way. Not long ago, visitors to a nature reserve in India witnessed an incredible scene. A bear and a tigress got into a standoff that almost turned into a fight. They say it's super rare because bears in India usually don't attack tigers. They're more or less evenly matched, and such a fight takes a ton of energy. Plus, there's the risk of injury. Basically, nobody wants that. But that day, the tigress probably wasn't too keen on fighting. At the moment of the encounter, she was busy feeding her cubs and couldn't afford to get hurt. Overall, interactions between bears and tigers are complicated. They happen all over the world, and everywhere these animals respect each other as worthy opponents. But in Canada, bears are something else. I'm talking about grizzlies. You can find grizzlies in Alaska, though of course it's better not to run into one, and also in the southwest of Canada and some parts of the northwestern United States. Grizzlies are actually a subspecies of brown bear, and Siberian tigers come across brown bears all the time. But grizzlies aren't just any bears. They're armed with huge, long claws, live up to 25 years in the wild, and weigh around 880 pounds on average as adults. And I say on average for a reason, because that's far from the max. For comparison, the heaviest Siberian brown bears top out at 770 pounds. Basically, little kids next to a really big grizzly. And it's not just about size and weight. It's also about what they can do with it. Grizzlies are naturally aggressive. These are huge, angry bears who just want to fight someone. Their aggression is something evolution gave them so they could keep up with other predators like wolves, big cats, and other bears. Though honestly, if you're a half-ton bear with 4-inch claws, people should respect and fear you even without being extra angry. But nature knows best, of course. So why am I telling you all this? In theory, if a grizzly ran into a Siberian tiger, it would probably be the bear's choice. And the bear would win, take the tiger's food, and hopefully not kill it. So basically, don't mess with grizzlies if you can. Well, anyway, what about the other predators? Canada's already home to some big cats, 2 species of lynx, and the largest and most elusive of all wild cats, the cougar. No need to worry about the lynx. They're doing great in the wild and are even listed as a species of least concern. But the eastern cougars in Canada aren't doing so well. Eastern cougars used to roam all across North America, and in Western Canada they're still doing pretty well, but in the eastern provinces there are hardly any left. As usual, humans are to blame. For a very, very long time, people hunted cougars to stop them from eating livestock, and also as trophies. Then came deforestation, expanding settlements, and habitat destruction from all sorts of industry. In short, classic stuff. Cougar numbers dropped sharply because they need lots of space, plenty of forest, and zero human presence to thrive. Today, eastern cougars are protected in Ontario. Scientists think that if the conditions can be restored, their numbers might slowly start to rise. But in these cautious hopes, suddenly introducing Siberian tigers definitely isn't part of the plan. What would they even do? Steal the puma's prey? Kill them? Cougars usually hunt at night and rarely chase their prey. They creep slowly and silently, then strike. They mostly feed on deer, but also eat beavers, coyotes, and other small mammals. In other words, both their hunting style and their menu are kind of tiger-like. But to get an idea of what an encounter between a Siberian tiger and a cougar might look like, we need to look at another big cat. A few years ago, the body of an Amur leopard was found in one of China's national parks. Experts quickly figured out who the main suspect was, because instead of fingerprints, it left paw prints. It was a fully grown male Siberian tiger, and the width of its hind paw reached 4.5 inches. And while tigers and leopards had crossed paths before and even fought, though very rarely, there have been more tigers around recently, so apparently they decided to see what leopards taste like. And since Siberian tigers are way bigger than Amur leopards, it's not hard to guess who doesn't stand a chance. So if a Siberian tiger comes across a cougar, it could easily kill it. And if we're talking about eastern cougars in Canada, they seem to have enough problems without any tigers. But let's say we're willing to take the risk and still bring these huge predators in to hunt wild boars. They'd hunt them, right? Well, turns out there are some nuances here too. Tigers are loners who actively mark their territory to keep any other contenders away. They use scent marks and sounds to define the boundaries of their turf and let everyone know about it. In other words, they roar really loudly. As for smells, tigers have scent glands on their tails, paws, and faces, but when they really want to show that the territory is theirs and no one else's, they even spray urine. Just to be safe, once it gets dark, they patrol their grounds to reinforce their presence and warn potential intruders. And tiger territories are actually huge. For females, it's between 92 and 173 square miles, though sometimes a mother is willing to share land with her daughters. Male territories can reach 733 square miles, and males, of course, don't share with their sons, but they don't mind overlapping with females' land. Overall, it doesn't sound too bad. Tigers would control large areas of land, which means they'd be taking out wild boars. But here comes a big but. Adult tigers need to kill 50 to 60 big animals a year. For females with cubs, that number goes up. Siberian tigers hunt roughly every 6 to 7 days, so that's about 1 kill a week. What does that mean? A territory of 173 to 733 square miles where 1 to 2, at most 3 to 4 wild boars get killed per week. That's just a drop in the ocean. Really, considering how fast boars reproduce, this kind of culling does nothing. Even if every tiger brought in kills 60 animals a year, it wouldn't fix the situation. Plus, it wouldn't necessarily be 60 boars. Tigers will get other animals too, like endangered cougars. You can't explain to tigers that those are protected by the state. And honestly, even bringing a lot of Siberian tigers to Canada is impossible. Back in 2022, there were roughly 756 of them in Russia's Far East, and 200 of those were cubs who might not even survive until 2025. How many could you actually take? 20, 30 tigers? Even 100 wouldn't make much difference. Plus, wild boars have learned to avoid people. What's stopping them from learning to avoid tigers? That is, at first, the boars will probably be surprised that something big and striped is eating them, but then they'll figure out what's what. Because pigs are some of the smartest mammals on the planet. They can understand human instructions, use simple tools, and even complete tasks that are kind of like video games. So if your teammate in a game is suspiciously smart, maybe he's got hooves. And yes, that's also why boars are so hard to hunt. A tiger doesn't even have to make a mistake. It can kill a wild boar right in front of its herd, and that herd will take note. When that happens, the tiger will have to look for easier prey, and hopefully it won't start venturing near humans while searching, because that's a whole new level of risk. In short, the whole plan is doomed to fail. Bottom line, on paper it sounds good, but in practice, it's just cons all around. And wait, I haven't even mentioned the impact on wildlife in general. Since Siberian tigers aren't exactly native to North America, so their appearance would totally shake the balance. These big cats fill a niche that partly overlaps with wolves, cougars, and bears. So those cougars, wolves, and bears would be affected. Well, except for grizzlies, of course. Grizzlies are safe, they're just too fierce. But really, it's not just that Siberian tigers would eat someone else's food, they could bring diseases the local felines aren't used to. That could mean more extinctions. And like any non-native species, Amur tigers might feel way too comfortable and start spreading all over the northern USA and Canada. And then we'd get pest tigers. Now that'd be one hell of a twist. You owe me a like. See you later.